Hey everybody, welcome back to When the Lights Go Out. I'm Eli.
I'm Moof.
And I'm Rachel.
And today we're going to talk about some interesting stuff. Actually, our good friend Rachael kind of came to us on Twitter. If you don't know, our Twitter is at Lights Go Out Pod, and we like to have conversations with a lot of people. And Rachael mentioned something interesting. Rachel, do you want to tell everybody what that is?
Yeah. So I think especially recently, there's been a lot of talk about in the world of sports, whether politics should be even discussed or even in the realm of sports at all. So with a lot of different stuff on Twitter, I don't know. It's just a lot of different, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff to talk about. And so we talked about it, and we're going to put it into a podcast and kind of discuss a lot of that stuff. And before we get into it, though, as I mentioned before, we have a Twitter at Lights Go Out Pod. We give a lot of updates on all of the things we do. We have an Instagram at When the Lights Go Out Pod. We also give updates there, and IGTV videos, different clips of our podcasts, so you get little sneak peeks.
Nice.
Which is fun. And we also have a website, whenthelightsgooutpodcast.com. We put up all of our podcasts up there. We also do blog posts, so you can find our blog posts there. And we have special thanks to our editor, Kate Rempe. She puts up with a lot of stuff to make the blog post really good. And we're really thankful to her, really proud of what we put out there. So now let's get started. So Rachel, you're going to lead us through this?
Yeah, sure thing.
I'm excited.
So I think especially recently, with just the current political and social climate we're in, especially with the rise of Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of different athletes have been showcasing their political opinions. Sometimes that's met with positive reactions. Sometimes it really isn't, such as, LeBron James being told to shut up and dribble. But it's kind of interesting looking back through like American sports history specifically, both like the intersection of sports and politics and the idea that they shouldn't mix. It's very deeply rooted in all of like sports history. So I kind of did a little bit of research. I kind of wanted to talk about like historically how politics have already been intertwined with sports. So I think one of the main things is the national anthem. You go to any sporting event, that's the first thing that happens. Even growing up, going to high school games, every single game, everyone would stop what they're doing, put their hand on their heart and sing the national anthem. So I did a little bit of research to kind of see why we do that. It seems kind of weird. There's no other scenario where you go and do the national anthem really other than sporting events. But so back in like the late 19th century, a lot of sporting events, they would have these like live military bands, and they would sometimes play the Star Spangled Banner at these baseball games, but it wasn't really that common of an occurrence. But on September 5th, 1918, during Game 1 of the World Series in Chicago between the Boston Red Sox and the Chicago Cubs, that all really began to change. So it was kind of a rough game, but the Sox and the Cubs were both playing great, but the climate at the time was kind of funky. So at the time, this was when the U.S. had just joined World War I. And at this point, over 100,000 soldiers, had died. And then also a day before the game in Chicago, a bomb exploded, which is, where the game was. And that killed 4 people, injured many more. So a lot of people, it was kind of a scarce crowd that day. People didn't want to go out after that happened. And then on top of that, the U.S. government announced it was going to begin drafting Major League Baseball players for the war. So a lot of different factors at the time, just a lot of stuff going on. So the entire game, the crowd was just not really into it. There was no like hype at all. But during the 7th inning stretch, the U.S. Navy band started to play the Star Spangled Banner. And actually, one of the Red Sox infielders, Fred Thomas, he was in the Navy and he had been granted furlough to play in the World Series. So as the song started, he turned towards the flag and he gave it a military salute. Everyone else followed suit, turning to the flag, hands over their heart, and the crowd just like erupted. Like they really got into it. They started singing along at the end. They just erupted in applause and cheers, and the game just like was such a better experience afterward. So because of that, they decided to play that song at each of the series' remaining games. And that's kind of where it started, which is also, I think, kind of interesting because, again, this game was in 1918 and the Star Spangled Banner wasn't even the national anthem until 1931. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, isn't that bizarre?
I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
So this practice kind of started due to like just trying to get the crowd hyped.
Exactly. Isn't that so strange?
I was thinking about that as you were saying that, and I was thinking, like, what song would you do that today with? And I have to go with Disturbia by Rihanna. I think that would really do it.
There's one song that they play at every single football game ever. It's Jump.
Oh
my god.
By Aerosmith? Was that? No.
Van Halen?
Van Halen, thank you. That's a good one. I like Welcome to the Jungle. That's always one that gets me.
I like X Gon' Give It to You. Everyone rise for the national anthem.
Yeah, everyone rise for the national anthem. X Gon' Give It to You. And then everyone takes off their hats and they're like, this is
first we gonna rock. So yeah, it's kind of bizarre history. Again, the Star Spangled Banner wasn't even the national anthem, but it kind of became this tradition. And I guess 20 years afterwards, it actually was officially the national anthem. So a lot of people are saying now that it's kind of an outdated practice. I mean,
yeah, it's about the War of 1812. Anything.
Yeah.
When we fought Canadians in the War of 1812, they were technically still British citizens at that time, but we lost to Canadians.
I think
they're completely different people now.
At this point, it's more about the symbolic patriotism.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
Which, I mean, there's an argument that is kind of overstated in sports nowadays too.
Yeah,
that's kind of a different conversation that we can get to.
Yeah, we can get to that. And actually, I will say that we talked. I had a great conversation with a mutual friend of mine and Rachel's, Brandon, on a podcast a while ago, where we talked about the more recent protests and the flag, national anthem, and all of that. And it's if you haven't heard that, it's a super interesting converation.
Yes,
from a different perspective. But it was really interesting to hear that he was like, it's a lot of the discourse is on the national anthem and the flag, and that's not where the problem was.
Absolutely. So even more historically, just mentioning a few other things other instances where sports and politics have been completely intersected. Jackie Robinson, I mean, him playing baseball at all, it was big steps for, Black athletes, but it was 100% political,
Oh, yeah.
It was just because of who he was as a person and the politics at the time that made it such a problem when it didn't really need to be.
I just want to quickly interject, and everybody knows that the Washington football team kind of sucks for many reasons.
Oh, I was going to say this too.
But did you know that the Washington football team was the last professional sports franchise to integrate?
Oh, I did not know that.
Now you know. Now you can hate them even more.
The player that they traded for to make that happen, Bobby Mitchell, recently in the Hall of Fame, recently died. They're wearing the Washington football team is wearing a patch with his number this season because he died a couple months ago. I mean, that's it's cool that they're doing that, but I always, whenever I see it, I can't help but think that they're distract from the other things.
Right. Do you have a year when that happened? Do you know?
I can look it up real quick.
1962.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were the last football team to integrate, and
that's crazy. So yeah, and then another big event that kind of changed the sports climate is definitely 9/11. As everyone knows, that's after 9/11, it was a big push for coming together and patriotism, we love our country, etc. So that's kind of when all of the big football stadium size flags started showing up at all these different sporting events and military honorings, etc. That's kind of what launched that. To kind of just celebrate the country and celebrate each other. But now, years after, we're still kind of honoring, which we'll get into that later. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of different instances historically where politics have been very much encouraged to not be in sports. So a couple examples I have in the 1968 Olympics, when Tommy Smith and John Carlos, two African-American athletes, they did the Black Love Fist, and they didn't, they wore black socks, no shoes for black poverty, but they were, booed off the podium. They were kind of ostracized from sports for a while, and they would go home to death threats.
Wow.
really intense stuff. And again, they, brought politics into sports and were absolutely shunned for it. Another person, Muhammad Ali, he very famously was against the Vietnam War, refused to serve in the army. And then because of this, he was banned from boxing, which I think is kind of crazy. But
especially since he's like the most famous boxer we know today. Besides, I don't think anybody is.
Yeah.
Besides maybe Rocky.
And like real quick,
but not even
about Tommy Smith and John Carlos.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many people actually know this, but after that incident, the International Olympic Committee and the U.S. Olympic Committee forced them to give their medals back.
Really?
Oh, really?
They weren't allowed to keep their medals after that incident.
So they won.
They won, didn't get their medals.
And then didn't get their medals.
They won, I think, a gold and a bronze.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I mean, they did get their medals, but they were forced to return them
That
to the
is
IOC.
like they don't have the physical medals. Like that's that they earned.
No.
Because they were like, but you should be nice to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
That's ridiculous.
It's crazy. I don't know. I just think it's so bizarre that certain aspects of like politics and patriotism can be put into sports, but then other times it really can't, especially if it goes against something that someone believes in.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like they were being negative or anything. I mean, they're just like saying, or at the time they were just saying like, we need to, this is important. We need to focus on this. People are hurting. People are dying. I mean, the 9/11 thing, as you said, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar. And it's like, we need to, let everyone know something bad happened, but it's going to be okay. There's steps towards it being okay. Everything's going to be fine. And even though the messages aren't exactly the same, it's like, it's along those same veins, and the differences in the reactions, because Americans were like devastated from 9/11, and everything, all like the NFL, MLB, did a lot of stuff, especially New York teams, but the whole sports leagues, both of them did a lot of stuff to honor people, and everyone was like super happy about it, and it's something we still do today.
Right.
Yeah. And like just keeping it going with like the things that happened after 9/11, as you said, there was a big push for patriotism in sport. And so this is kind of one of the bigger things we talked about in one of my classes at school. And something was pointed out to me that I honestly wasn't prepared to face. But there's a great story. Everybody who follows football either knows it or should know it, about Pat Tillman.
Yes.
Right.
So this is a guy who's an all-pro level player, Arizona Cardinal safety. He has a statue. He has a statue. Yeah. He sees, everybody sees 9/11 happen. He has something inside of him that says, I need to do more for my country. He basically cancels his contract with Cardinals, goes to the military, joins, I believe, the Green Berets.
He was in the Green Berets, yep. He was killed in combat.
Yeah, he was killed in combat.
Right.
Was it?
He was killed in Afghanistan in combat. And every year, that's brought up at some point during the NFL season.
Right.
And it's talked about, and it's celebrated. And yes, absolutely, it should be celebrated.
Right.
But one thing that is never mentioned once in any broadcast is the fact that he died by friendly fire.
Yeah, he was shot in the back.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody talks about that.
That is never brought up.
Wow.
And it's really interesting. I'm not saying that absolutely he's a hero.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody's arguing that.
Right.
It's just the fact that you're taking some facts that are unsavory and pushing them to the side. Yeah,
it's spinning the story so you can feel good about the narrative that you want to believe in. And as a viewer, you can't just let that storyline let someone spoon feed it to you. You kind of it sucks that no one would tell you that, but there are ways to find that information. It's definitely important to kind of understand that.
Absolutely. It's all about, the story and, the outside perspective of everything, which even going off of that, today you see a lot of like military flyovers or like different like troop ceremonies going on at games. And it seems like a very nice thing, but at the same time, like these franchises are getting paid so much money for that. Like, they benefit so much from it. So it's not even a yay America thing. It's like sure, do that, great, but like we're going to make so much money off of it. And that's what it's all about. I mean, if you go buy a camo NFL jersey, like, do you think they're really going to put all that money towards like America or towards the military? No, it's all for profit.
That was one thing that you mentioned on Twitter that struck me. I was like, I didn't even realize. Yeah, in October, it originally started as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but now it's, I think they call it Crucial Catch. The NFL does, where you wear all the colors of the cancer ribbons, and they do a lot to kind of push that, and they should. It's great. It's a great cause. And they do a lot of donations and awareness stuff. And then November is all Military Appreciation Month. I remember in 2012, like RG3 was like wearing he wore a sleeve. He wore a sleeve. All of October, he wore a pink sleeve, and I was like, oh, I guess that's kind of cool. Like, that's a thing that you can do. And then at least one game in November, he wore like a camo sleeve, and I was like, I don't know, that doesn't really look. That's interesting. But I was like, I guess that's what they gave him. You know what I mean? And it's crazy how, looking back at that and then thinking about the conversation we kind of had on Twitter, I guess it's, shown to everybody like it's like a good thing. Like, we're honoring our troops. Like, let's play the Star Spangled or the Armed Forces, all of their, like the Navy's theme or whatever, and
Armed Forces Salute.
Armed Forces Salute, yeah. And have everybody stand, and they do that at a lot of games. But it's like either propaganda or just kind of like a commercial, like product placement.
Yeah, it's like a commercial sellout. I mean, absolutely.
We're kind of more critical for like, we're being more critical towards like pro sports leagues right now. But all companies do this.
Oh, absolutely.
It's philanthropy, but like it's philanthropy for profit.
Right. It's like, you think that can of soup that has a breast cancer ribbon on it, like, is that really doing anything for it?
I mean, not to say that they don't donate to these causes.
Right.
Which, I mean, absolutely they do. But in the end, it's a business.
Yeah. But I think what the problem is, in that case, specifically with the military and sports case, is that I would argue that when you have product placement, like, I mean, you can look at like European soccer jerseys or any soccer jerseys, and they have like 15 different companies' logos on them, or NASCAR has that. And recently, the NBA started a lot of teams.
They have a like specific spot on their jersey where they can have
where they can
sponsor.
It's kind of like, going into that, you kind of know that is sponsorship, and it's the same thing with commercials on television. It's like, that's a sponsorship that you don't necessarily have to believe. It's like, it's being presented to you as a sponsorship, not as like philanthropy or charity, or just like
you're watching a commercial, you're being advertised to, but when a bunch of military planes fly over, like, that's, you don't know. You know what I mean? Like, everyone just kind of thinks collectively.
It's not approached like that in the same way, even though it's effectively the same thing.
I think it is also a lot different in America, because we have, not only through sports, but we have like this pressure to be patriotic.
Right.
That's not present in other countries. Like, for example, my parents, actually, I should say my family, because I was born there too. We're from India. We moved here like a month after I was born. But my parents grew up and born and raised in India. They came here, and we were talking about this one time, and they were just like, the American people are like, they consider themselves American, but at this point in time, they're kind of like, American people, they're kind of disrespecting their flag. And I'm kind of sitting there like, how are they doing that? And my parents are like, they're putting their flag on bikinis, they're putting their flags on like tire covers, they're doing all these different things to their flag. And to my parents, who are from India, that's highly disrespectful to the flag, because you're like wearing it, you're
They've
using
commercialized
it as underwear, it's commercialized. So there's definitely like a cultural difference between like other countries and America, where we're so used to having the flag and patriotism as kind of a consumer product.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I was just earlier today, I watched an episode of The Boys on Amazon, who's kind of a mix of Captain America, Marvel Comics, Marvel movies, and like Superman. It's kind of well-known characters. But but it's an interesting how he's treated because he's like shown as like blonde hair, blue eyed American boy.
Mm-hmm.
That's his thing. He wears a cape, and the cape is the American flag. And every time I see it, I'm like, that's so weird. But I'm not surprised that is a thing in the show. I mean, it's kind of an allegory for how we treat the flag.
Is that too different than Captain America's shield?
No, I'm saying it's again,
Okay.
it's the same thing. He is the American, hero. That's kind of how he's treated in the public eye in that show. I mean, and it's really interesting. And I will say though, Captain America, that showed up in World War II. So I guess in times of war, the nationality would be, or the sense of nationality would be higher.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense.
Just speaking from, I guess, my parents' perspective,
mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, why is burning the flag actually a crime when you're wearing your flag as underwear?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, how much worse is it? Really?
Yeah.
I want to move from patriotism in sport to like athlete talking politics.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
So, like you mentioned at the top of the podcast, people telling LeBron James to shut up and dribble.
Mm-hmm.
People telling athletes to shut up and play. That's the dumbest thing. I don't even, because in my mind, athletes affect so many people. When you think about it, sports is the only profession that can dictate such a large amount of people's emotions day to day.
Right.
Yeah. It's the ultimate equalizer.
Like, everybody on some level follows sports.
Yeah.
If you don't follow it directly, you know someone who does follow it and who's very, very impassioned with their team. So athletes have such a huge say in what goes on, right? And telling athletes to just shut up and play their game is essentially suppressing people who have so much power. And I feel like there definitely is a race component to it.
Oh, absolutely.
There's absolutely a race component to it. At some point, you have all these black athletes with so much money, so much power, so much sway in the community. You kind of forget that they have to deal with race problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, Kaepernick is the greatest example.
Absolutely.
When he was doing his thing, when he was kneeling in 2016, people, I think, started saying, oh, he's never faced racism. He's so successful.
That's not
all
true.
Exactly. Like,
not at all.
All these things. And like, why is he protesting? He has it good enough.
Right. That's not the point.
That's not the point.
That's never been the point.
And so, like, people don't think athletes this isn't the only reason, but I feel like people don't think athletes can say anything because they have it good enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is terrible.
And it's one thing too, because it's like athletes have the right, as anyone else does, to say what's on their mind, free speech and all that. But like, imagine like going on Twitter and then someone says something and you're like, go back to doing my taxes, Stan. It's like, you wouldn't say that. That's ridiculous to say. Like, everyone has
opinions.
Right. And you can have a conversation and you can not like it and not listen, but you cannot tell someone to stop talking if they're just talking.
Right. And if you think about how many like young kids look up to these athletes, it's just, if they just like, shut up and dribbled and didn't, talk about issues or like bring light to things, like these young kids are not going to get that same influence. They're not going to learn about the world that, actually exists.
So you're gonna tell LeBron to shut up and dribble, but you're gonna accept all the schools he's built. You're gonna accept his money to go to college.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're gonna do all that, but you're not gonna listen to his opinion.
You're gonna wear his jersey.
Get the out of here.
Yeah.
Like, that's just it. As an athlete, I fully, like 100% in my soul, as an athlete with a platform like you have a duty to use it.
Yes.
You might be black and you're having a great life. You have millions of dollars. You're Patrick Mahomes and you're going to make $1 billion in your career. That's great. But if you didn't do that, you would first of all, face just as many problems as everyone else does. Second of all, still face a lot of those problems.
Right. It'd be a disservice to not, try to make the world around you better when you have that platform.
Yeah.
I don't know all the problems Patrick Mahomes faces in his life, but there are so many people that, I mean, probably most of the population of the world would easily trade places with him. So, like, it's just, you have so many good things in your life. Not saying you don't have problems, but you have such a better chance to affect the world than me or Eli or you, anybody has, to actually make a lasting, visible impact.
Yeah.
Right.
The amount of money someone like that has, and the amount of viewership that someone like that has just on a daily basis, the amount of people that are going to be looking at that person, even if you don't spend a drop of money, which is okay if that's what you want to do, you want to save all your money for your kids or something, like, that's none of my business, I guess. But even if you don't spend any money, you have the ability to change people's minds. You have the ability to put ideas into people's heads, or at least get people to think about certain things and kind of starting the wheels of change. And, I think we're all on the same page where we agree that something like that should happen, and telling people to not do that is ridiculous.
It's honestly hypocritical.
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
It's like, you stop talking, I'm talking.
Like I said before, you're not gonna let LeBron speak, but then you're gonna take all the good things he's actually, like, you're gonna take all the money he's spending.
Right.
I do also think it's very hypocritical to tell these athletes, to not, speak their mind on different political or social issues. But then, I don't know, you have presidential first pitches, you have, you win the Super Bowl, you go to the White House, like.
Or more recently, you don't.
You don't.
Yeah, or you don't. Exactly.
And that is important, and you are allowed to do that.
Right.
It's crazy too. Imagine people, the way people treat those players that don't go. They're like, we have decided as a team, like the Warriors, they didn't go, and we're like, instead we're going to talk to Obama. We're going to do a lot of these different things.
Right.
Talk to people in DC. We're still going to make the trip. It's kind of like, it feels like a weird pilgrimage. He's like, we're still going to make the trip, but we're going to be more productive with what we believe in as a team.
It's just, I don't know. It's crazy to me that that's the thing that happens, and it all has meaning, if you go to the White House, if you don't, but like, why is that a thing to go to the White House when you win? It's kind of weird. I feel like in America, we do view these athletes as kind of pawns, and we watch them play, but we don't want them to say anything. But it's kind of weird, because if you think about really any other industry, like, I don't know, I'm thinking like Lin-Manuel Miranda. He's, he does music, he writes, he did Hamilton and everything, but he's also very, like, politically and socially active. And some reason that's okay, but it's not okay when Colin Kaepernick gets on his knee. Like, I don't know why there's these, like, preconceived notions of, like, patriotism in sports. Like, we expect them to just love America and shut up and play their sport.
Yeah. And, and I think it's integral to understand what Moof said before, how big sports are, specifically in this country, but, everywhere.
Right.
How many people it reaches, how many people do you know that go to a Super Bowl party to, like, eat the nachos? So many, because nachos are great, and, like, hanging out with friends. Or Doritos.
Doritos Locos Nachos, though?
Oh God.
All right, different conversation.
Everyone knows people that go to Super Bowl parties. There are, like, teachers and professors in school and college that will be like, oh, like, I'll give you guys, like, 5 bonus points if my team wins the Super Bowl or the World Series or something. That stuff happens all the time. So the fact that it's so ingrained in the fabric of our lives means that athletes are going to reach more people just by being athletes than a Lin-Manuel Miranda, who's going to be known for the one kind of, it's a smaller, probably a smaller sect of America, and probably not less passionate, but the way in which they're passionate is very different.
Right.
And I think it's important to know that because you're going to get a larger swath of America, you're most likely going to get more people with differing views. And it's arguably more important for pro athletes to have the conversations, because America needs to have the conversations.
A small part of me kind of, like, understands why people are mad when athletes protest, though, because, like, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I get it, but at the same time, you're not. This is a different world we're living in. Like, you're not just gonna get entertainment. I don't want to say deal with it, but like, athletes have their feelings and they're gonna say what they want to say, and you can't stop that.
But like, think about like the 60s and 70s. Like, like Joe Namath is very famous for being like the bachelor quarterback. We didn't know what he was gonna do, right? And like,
oh, we knew what he was gonna do.
I mean, yeah,
he guaranteed it.
That's a good point. But like, him in today's world with the amount of paparazzi, the amount of just like everybody has a cell phone, everybody has a smartphone, can take pictures, can put stuff up. It's harder to be private,
right?
And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think it's really great how ideas are able to travel across borders, city, state, country. I think that's really great. But these athletes are people just like the rest of us, and they have to live in the same world. And so that world where information is easily accessed and shared means that those athletes are gonna share information, find information, and give out information.
Right. It's also strange because I feel like a lot of celebrities, if they don't speak out about a topic or like Black Lives Matter or something like that, their fan base almost like shames them. Like,
it's a work though. Like, we can't. Drew Brees said what he said, and then he got dragged on Twitter, and then he took it back. That's fine. That's where.
Not only that, he talked to people.
Yeah.
Like Malcolm Jenkins had like a full statement of like what to do, like this is why this hurts.
Deshaun Jackson, another case, somewhere where social media was not involved.
Right.
Michael Jordan. There was a political race in North Carolina while he was playing, and he did not take either candidate's side because he was like, whoa, I'm just here to play basketball. He took that approach, which is completely fine.
Yeah.
You don't want to say anything.
If that's what you want to do, that's okay.
Yeah. Right.
It has to be your choice, though.
Exactly.
Yep.
But he got shamed by his fan base because the person who won that election was a racist white dude.
I think it's really interesting to talk about this topic specifically right now with having Donald Trump in office, because he has some very strong opinions about some of the stuff we've talked about.
Yes, sir.
I just think it's really fascinating how he obviously like condemns kind of like the whole Colin Kaepernick, not standing for the anthem, etc. But so I would say he's on the keep politics out of sports, shut up and dribble kind of side, but at the same time, especially recently with Big Ten sports coming back and him being like tweeting about, oh, like, you're welcome, I got Big Ten sports back. I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on his interjections with sports.
I can say with like more confidence than I ever have been about anything, Donald Trump had nothing to do with bringing Big Ten sports back.
Oh, he had nothing to do with it.
That is purely about money.
Oh, yeah.
That is. Well, I mean, technically, Trump is all about money, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, he didn't have anything directly related to getting Big Ten sports back.
I don't know if he did. Whatever happened, I don't think he directly called them up and was like, hey, do this. And they were like, well,
you're the president. We gotta. I just think it's very interesting. Like, why is he tweeting about sports? You know what I mean? If he's the president, we're keeping sports and politics apart. Why is he always getting involved with sports?
Right. And it's the thing, it's like the difference between presidents can be like, oh wow, like I'm from, like Obama was from Chicago or Illinois. He was a senator in Illinois. And so he's like, oh, like I'm a Bulls fan, I'm a Bears fan, and he talks about that like a person. But he you know how a person does. You know what people are? It's one of those. What I'm saying is like when he talks about sports, or for that matter, any other president, it is not inherently political. Now, anything a president does can be seen as political, and that is its own conversation. But
again, you can be more than one thing at a time.
You can be more than one thing at a time, and the fact that there is clear separation. And
yes,
for instance, the most recent case is President Obama, the Chicago sports fan, and President Obama, the president. but it's we haven't seen President Trump, the sports fan. We've only seen President Trump, the president, who sees something in the sports world that can benefit him.
I think it's also interesting about when the Kaepernick thing was going on, he said something about, I don't remember the exact quote, paraphrasing here. He said, if some player of mine was to kneel, I would get that son of a off the field.
Right.
And I think that was a very telling moment for me because a lot of the owners essentially of the NFL essentially were like, dude, shut up. Like, like, I mean, they may have agreed with him or they may not have. But overall, they were kind of like, okay, you don't get involved with our thing.
Right.
I mean, like, he was just doing his thing. He was trying to curry favor.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, get his approval ratings up from his small demographic. Who cares about that?
Yeah.
Right.
But, yeah. I mean, it is what it is.
So we just had a great conversation about what we're calling the separation of sport and state, but it surrounds a bunch of different areas. The Black Lives Matter movement and the protests is one. The national anthem and all the history with that dating back to the early part of the 19th century, through 9/11 and what's happened because of that, and kind of the hypocrisy between the acceptance of political statements about the military and sports, but not about other social issues. So, it's been great to talk to you, Rachel, our good friend. You have helped us before on When the Lights Go Out. Even if people haven't heard you, you've been a big help in general. So I want to thank you for coming on and bringing this to us effectively. You had the idea and we just got to hear all your interesting thoughts about it. So it was great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So yeah, thanks Rachel for coming on. Thanks Moof for being a part of this.
And I'm Moof.
Pleasure to be here.
And I'm Moof.
Always happy to be here. Always happy to contribute. It's a 5-star podcast. That's what I would give it on Apple Music. You should too.
It's not Apple Music, it's Apple Podcast. Anyways, thanks Moof. So it was great to talk to both of you guys. We had a really interesting conversation, and I think there are even more conversations to be had about this topic, especially in the future with what will happen. I'm sure this topic is, as we often say in our podcasts, it's a dynamic topic. It's going to change. There's going to be interesting things that
it's fluid.
It's fluid. Yeah.
We're just going to go with the flow.
We are just going to go with the flow. And that's us at When the Lights Go Out podcast. And you can see those future podcasts on When the Lights Go Out podcast.com. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on really any of the major podcasting services. You can find us on Instagram at When the Lights Go Out pod. You can find us on Twitter at Lights Go Out pod. We really like to hear from you guys. And I'd just like to thank everyone for listening. I'm Eli.
I'm Moof.
And I'm Rachel.
And this is When the Lights Go Out. See you next time.
This doesn't have to be in the podcast, but like, could you know how baseball players have walk-on music?
Yeah.
Can you imagine somebody walking on to, like, I knew you were trouble. Like,
Oh my
just
gosh.
like it, crying out the cold hard crowd.